Imagine going head-to-head with the IRS, the most relentless debt collector in the country, and walking away victorious. Sounds impossible, right? Well, think again. Hi, I'm Jeff from Courtroom 5, and this is Who Wrote That Up For You?, where we explore stories about people navigating civil court without lawyers. Today, we're talking about Joseph Safdieh, a man who did the unthinkable. He took on the IRS and won. That's right, the IRS. You know, the agency that can find a missing comma on a tax return from a decade ago, but somehow misplaces billions of dollars in fraud. Yeah, them. Safdieh didn't have a high-powered tax attorney. He didn't have a team of accountants. He had himself and a whole lot of determination. And against all odds, he walked away victorious. His story is proof that knowing the law can be your greatest weapon, even when you're up against the government's financial version of the Death Star. Now, to understand how Safdieh pulled this off, we have to talk about Section 6038 of the Internal Revenue Code. I know. Sounds about as thrilling as watching paint dry. But trust me, this little section of tax law is the reason the IRS was able to go after Safdieh like a dog on a bone. Section 6038 requires U.S. taxpayers to report their foreign financial assets, things like overseas bank accounts, foreign stocks, and international investments. The goal? Stop people from hiding money offshore. The problem? If you mess up the paperwork, even accidentally, the IRS can drop massive penalties on you like a ton of bricks. And guess who got crushed? Yep, Safdieh. For the tax years 2005 through 2009, the IRS accused him of failing to meet Section 6038's reporting requirements. Their solution? A notice of determination, which is just a fancy way of saying, we've decided you owe us a ridiculous amount of money, and there's nothing you can do about it. Pay up or we'll ruin your life. Most people in Safdieh's situation do one of two things: call a tax attorney, offer up their firstborn as payment, and pray for a miracle. Or write a check so big it makes them physically ill, then swear they'll do better next time. But Safdieh went for door number 3, fighting back, by himself. That's what lawyers call going pro se, which in Latin means in one's own behalf. In real life, it means I have no idea what I'm doing, but here we go. Taking on the IRS without a lawyer is like walking into a gunfight armed with a pair of tongs. The legal system is full of traps, tricks, and bureaucratic nightmares that can make even seasoned attorneys want to scream into the void. But Safdieh didn't back down, and if you're in a legal fight of your own, you don't have to back down either. At Courtroom 5, we help people like you learn the system, find support, and build confidence so you can take your shot, even if it's against a Goliath like the IRS. Back to the battlefield. While Safdieh was in the middle of his fight, 2 other taxpayers, Farhi and Mookie, were also duking it out with the IRS over these same Section 6038 penalties. And their cases would end up rocking the tax world. The U.S. tax court ruled in both cases that, get this, the IRS never had the legal authority to assess these penalties in the first place. That's right, all that aggressive enforcement, all those terrifying penalty notices. Turns out the IRS was basically just making it up as they went along. Cue the sound of thousands of taxpayers screaming, "Are you kidding me?" Now you'd think a ruling like that would be the end of it. But this is the IRS we're talking about. They don't lose quietly. They appealed the Farhi case to the D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals and, surprise, surprise, the appeals court reversed the decision. Actually, the IRS can do that, they said, because of course they did, but Mookie's case, that went a different way. The tax court doubled down, saying, nope, outside of D.C., Section 6038 penalties are still unenforceable. So now, whether you won or lost against the IRS depended entirely on where you filed your case. It was like the legal version of Whose Line Is It Anyway, where the rules are made up and the penalties don't count, unless you're in D.C. So where did that leave Safdieh? Well, lucky for him, he wasn't stuck in the D.C. circuit like Farhi. His case landed in a jurisdiction where the tax court's ruling in Mookie still stood. Seeing their own recent decision, the tax court ruled that the IRS had no authority to assess Safdieh's penalties, and just like that, poof, the IRS's case against him vanished. Safdieh's victory wasn't just a personal win, it set a precedent for other taxpayers facing similar penalties. But was it pure luck? Not exactly. Despite not being a lawyer, Joseph had done enough to put himself in the right place at the right time, armed with just enough knowledge to get the job done. His case is proof that you don't need to be a legal expert to fight back. You just need persistence, some research, and maybe a little bit of that rebellious streak that says, "Oh yeah? Watch me." Here are some key takeaways from this case. 1. Do your research. Safdieh wasn't a lawyer. He didn't have a legal team. He had Google, persistence, and the ability to connect the dots. Despite some missteps like handwritten filings that probably made the court squint, he understood enough to position himself for victory. Whether he actively followed Fari and Mookie or just got lucky with the tax court's awareness of those cases, one thing is clear: knowing the law can change your fate. The IRS came in swinging, but Safdieh was ready because he did his homework. If you're facing a legal battle, don't just panic and hope for the best. Read, research, and figure out how past rulings might work in your favor, because knowing the law isn't just helpful, it's power. 2. Speak the court's language. You don't need to sound like a Supreme Court justice to win a case, but you do need to make sense. Safdieh's filings may not have been polished, but his arguments were clear enough to be taken seriously. If you ever represent yourself in court, keep it simple. Organize your arguments. Cite the right laws or cases. Stick to the facts. Judges don't care if your legal brief isn't poetic. They care if it makes sense. A solid argument beats legal jargon every time. 3. Self-advocacy is your secret weapon. Safdieh could have given up. He could have written a massive check to the IRS and moved on. Instead, he fought and won. His case proves that you don't need a law degree to stand up for yourself. The key? Be proactive, do the work, push back when something seems unfair. Most legal battles, whether it's a tax fight, a contract dispute, or an eviction notice, aren't just about who has the best lawyer. They're about who shows up prepared. And sometimes just knowing your rights is enough to turn the tide. So if you ever find yourself in the legal trenches, take a page from Safdieh's book. Arm yourself with knowledge, make your case, and don't back down. You might just walk away victorious. How would you have handled this situation? Add your comments below. This has been Who Wrote That Up For You? Goodbye until next time.